The silent struggle. In the heart of the galaxy, amidst a grand assembly of alien species, Princess Mira stood alone. The Council Hall of the Galactic Concord was a monumental structure, towering above her like a maze of obsidian walls and glimmering metal. Voices from every corner of the galaxy echoed through the grand hall. Mighty warriors, cunning diplomats, and revered monarchs, all commanding attention with their mere presence. Yet in this sea of towering figures and imposing beings, Mira, the diminutive princess of the Velari, could scarcely be seen. Her race, the Velari, had long been overlooked. While known for their unparalleled intellect and extraordinary skill in diplomacy, their size, slender and short compared to other species, had relegated them to the shadows of galactic politics. Mira's heart tightened as she stood amidst the towering alien representatives, feeling like a ghost in the midst of their overwhelming presence. Even though she was royalty, she felt invisible. No one saw her. No one cared. The Velari had once been the architects of intergalactic peace, brilliant engineers who had designed technologies that bridged the great distances of space. But over the centuries, as the larger, more physically dominant species rose to power, the Velari's influence dwindled. Their small stature became synonymous with weakness, and their once revered status as galactic innovators had faded into obscurity. Now, the Velari were little more than a footnote in the history of the galaxy. Mira wore the traditional garb of her people, silver robes woven with the finest threads from her home planet, the fabric shimmering with an ethereal glow. Her crown, delicate and intricate, was a work of art made from crystal mined from the Velari's ancient caverns, its colors shifting with the light as though alive. Despite her royal appearance, Mira couldn't shake the feeling of being a mockery, a princess without a kingdom, a leader without followers. She walked silently through the vast council floor, her steps light, yet laden with the weight of countless expectations. She could hear murmurs as she passed, whispers that cut through the air like blades. Some aliens stared at her with disdain, their eyes clearly marking her as insignificant. Others simply ignored her, lost in their own discussions. Every glance, every word, felt like another stone piled on top of her, each one weighing her down. Mira's violet eyes glinted with frustration, but she refused to let them see her pain. She was here for a purpose, to make her people heard, to demand respect from the Galactic Council. But the task seemed impossible. Her father, King Velar, had sent her here with a simple message. The Velari are not just survivors. We are builders, creators, and thinkers. We belong here. Yet the harsh reality was that no one cared about her words. They cared about power. They cared about size. A tall delegate from the Kaldor Empire, a species known for their massive frames and muscular builds, strode by Mira, rushing past her without a second glance. His armor clanked with each heavy step, and his booming voice filled the air as he spoke to his companion. "Why bother with the Velari?" he scoffed. "A race so small, so frail. What can they contribute?" Mira's heart clenched. Her father had spent years cultivating alliances, forming strategic agreements to ensure that the Velari had a place in the galaxy's future. Yet the larger species dismissed them as irrelevant, as though their small size made them incapable of any real contribution. And as Mira stood there, she couldn't help but feel like a relic, a princess clinging to a fading dream. She needed air. Turning away from the crowd, Mira stepped onto a balcony overlooking the sprawling city beyond the council hall. The view was breathtaking, with shining towers reaching up toward the three setting suns, their golden light spilling across the landscape. For a moment, Mira allowed herself to breathe deeply, to savor the silence. Here she was alone, away from the jeers and the pitying stares. But the silence was short-lived. "You know, standing out here won't change anything." Mira froze, her breath catching in her chest. She turned to find a man standing a few feet away, his eyes scanning the horizon. He was tall, much taller than her, with broad shoulders and an easy, confident stance. His uniform bore the insignia of the Human Coalition, a patchwork of colors that marked him as part of the galaxy's newest superpower. His name, she would later learn, was Captain Elias Grant. Mira narrowed her eyes. "And why do you say that?" she asked, her voice calm but laced with frustration. "What would you know about it?" Grant shrugged, his expression thoughtful. "I'm just saying you can't solve everything by standing in the shadows. If you want people to take you seriously, you need to make them." Mira's heart skipped a beat. It was the first time someone had spoken to her without pity, without the usual judgment. His words weren't condescending. They were simply honest. Mira blinked, startled. "You think they'll listen?" she asked, her voice softer now. Grant glanced back at the crowd inside the council hall. "The galaxy is full of people who think they know everything," he said with a wry smile. "But the truth is, they often overlook the ones who don't scream the loudest. You're not here by mistake, Princess. You're here because your people matter. It's just a matter of showing them why." For the first time in a long while, Mira felt a spark of hope. She wasn't invisible. She wasn't alone. As the conversation lingered, something inside her began to shift. Mira realized that this was her chance, not just to fight for her people's place in the galaxy, but to prove that the Velari had more to offer than anyone had ever imagined. A spark of resolve. The stars outside flickered like distant beacons of hope, but for Princess Mira, they felt like tiny pinpricks in an endless expanse of darkness. Standing on the balcony beside Captain Elias Grant, she could almost feel the weight of her people's history pressing down on her shoulders. The Velari were small, yes, but they had once been the architects of the galaxy's greatest advancements. Mira's heart burned with the knowledge that if only the galaxy could see past their size, they might remember the legacy her people had built. Captain Grant's words lingered in the air like a challenge, one that she could not easily ignore. He didn't see her as a weakling or an afterthought. In his eyes, she was someone worth fighting for. But Mira couldn't shake the feeling that his encouragement, though kind, might have been too naive. Could she really make them listen? Could she convince the galaxy's leaders that the Velari deserved a place at the table? She glanced over at Grant, who had returned to watching the horizon, his posture relaxed yet purposeful. He wasn't trying to impress her with grand speeches or promises. He was simply being real. For the first time in a long time, Mira felt like someone saw her, not as the weak princess of an irrelevant race, but as a person with potential. "You're not wrong," she said quietly, breaking the silence between them. "But how do I show them? How do I make them believe we matter?" Grant turned slightly toward her, his gaze steady. "You don't have to make them believe in everything. Just make them believe in you. Show them that you're here for a reason, that you're not afraid to stand tall, even if you don't fit the mold of what they expect." Mira's eyes widened. Stand tall. She looked down at herself, at her slender form, at her small frame. How could someone like her stand tall in a room full of giants? Grant smiled, reading the doubt in her expression. "I'm not talking about physical height. I'm talking about your presence, your conviction. The giants in that room might have the size and strength, but you've got the intelligence, the quickness, the courage. You don't need to play by their rules. You need to rewrite the game." A flicker of something warm stirred inside Mira. She had always known that the Velari had something special, something the larger species overlooked. It wasn't their size or their physical prowess, but their sharp minds and unparalleled ability to navigate the complexities of the galaxy. Perhaps it was time to stop trying to prove themselves on the terms of others. Maybe the galaxy needed to learn to see the value in something other than brute strength. "I've been trying so hard to fit into their world," Mira confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought if I could just prove we were strong enough, that we were as capable as they are, they might accept us. But they don't see us that way. They never will." Grant's expression softened, and he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Maybe that's the problem," he said. "You're trying to be like them. The Velari don't need to be like anyone else. You're already something special. Don't let them tell you otherwise." Mira's heart thudded in her chest. She had spent so much time trying to meet the expectations of those around her, trying to prove that her people were worthy of a seat at the galactic table. But what if she had been going about it all wrong? What if the key to changing the perception of the Velari wasn't trying to fit into the mold, but shattering it altogether? A sense of clarity washed over her, and for the first time, she felt a surge of determination rise within her. She wasn't going to fight for a place in their world by following their rules. She was going to forge her own path, one where the Velari were valued for who they were, not for how they measured up to others. She would show the galaxy that there was strength in intellect, in agility, in the ability to think and adapt in ways that the larger species could never match. "I think I know what I need to do," Mira said, her voice firmer now, her eyes bright with a new resolve. Grant raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Oh, what's the plan?" Mira turned her gaze back to the council hall, the distant hum of voices filtering through the thick walls. "I'm not going to beg them for recognition. I'm going to make them see what they've been missing. I'm going to show them that the Velari are not just a relic of the past. We are the future." Captain Grant's lips curled into a smile, one that spoke of quiet approval. "That's the spirit," he said. "You've got a fire inside you, Mira. Don't let anyone dim it." Mira felt a swell of pride as the words settled deep within her. She wasn't alone. Not anymore. With Grant's support and her newfound resolve, she felt ready to take on the council, to stand before the galaxy's greatest minds and prove that the Velari had not only earned their place, but would shape the future of the stars. But it wouldn't be easy. The road ahead would be filled with obstacles, more insults, more rejection, more closed doors. The council would never embrace change without a fight. But Mira was prepared. She had already faced the hardest challenge, learning to believe in herself. Now it was time to prove that belief to the universe. As the two of them stood there, the last of the suns dipped below the horizon, leaving the council hall bathed in the soft glow of the stars. Mira's mind raced with possibilities, with plans, with a future that had seemed impossible just hours ago. There was still much to do, but for the first time in a long time, she felt ready. And in that moment, Mira knew she wasn't just fighting for her people anymore. She was fighting for something greater, something that the galaxy could no longer ignore. The spark of strategy. The days that followed Mira's conversation with Captain Elias Grant were a blur of planning, strategizing, and self-reflection. She had returned to her quarters in the Velari delegation's wing of the Galactic Concord with a renewed sense of purpose, but also a nagging feeling of uncertainty. What she had been told, what she had promised herself, seemed monumental, perhaps even impossible. How could she, a princess of a nearly forgotten race, change the minds of the galaxy's most powerful species? Yet, as the nights passed, Mira realized that this journey wasn't just about convincing the council. It was about reshaping the way the galaxy saw the Velari. They weren't just a small people trying to survive. They were a people with something to offer, something they hadn't fully realized in centuries. Their brilliance, their resilience, their ingenuity. Those were the qualities Mira would use to build her case. In her quarters, a holographic map of the galaxy hummed softly, displaying the various planets and star systems that the Velari had once been instrumental in shaping. It was a bittersweet reminder of what had been lost. The map shimmered with clusters of bright stars, symbols of alliances and treaties the Velari had helped forge. But there were also dark spots, places where their influence had faded, where the shadow of larger species had eclipsed them. Mira paced back and forth, her thoughts focused. She had to do more than ask for the council's approval. She needed to show them why the Velari still mattered. It wasn't enough to talk about the past. She had to prove they had a role to play in the future. A small, unassuming race could be the key to the galaxy's survival, if only the right minds could be convinced. And that was where the humans came in. Mira's thoughts drifted back to Captain Grant. There was something about him, something different. He was strong, but not in the way the Zothar Empire's warlords were. He didn't rely on brute force or intimidation. Instead, he relied on ingenuity, observation, and most importantly, an unwavering belief in the strength of the human spirit. Mira knew that Grant's perspective was invaluable, and that the humans, despite their young age as a galactic power, might hold the key to unlocking her people's future. She needed to make a connection with them, to bridge the gap between the Velari and the human forces that had risen to power so quickly. Humans valued intelligence, adaptability, and resourcefulness, the very qualities the Velari embodied. Mira's plan was taking shape, and she could feel the weight of it settling into her chest, both exciting and terrifying her in equal measure. The next step was clear. She would need to approach the humans directly. The next council session was just a few days away, and Mira knew that she couldn't afford to wait any longer. She needed allies, and the humans seemed like the most likely candidates. If she could convince Captain Grant and the other human representatives of the Velari's value, perhaps they would use their influence to sway the council. Maybe, just maybe, they could help her prove that the Velari had more to offer than anyone realized. Determined, Mira set out to meet with Captain Grant. She found him in a small, quiet corner of the council complex, his posture relaxed, but his eyes scanning the room with military precision. He looked up when he saw her approach, a small, knowing smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Princess Mira," he said with a respectful nod. "What brings you to my humble corner?" Mira returned the smile, but there was no time for pleasantries. "Captain Grant, I need your help," she said, her voice firm and resolute. "I have a plan, but I can't do it alone. I need the humans on my side." Grant raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "I thought you didn't want to rely on anyone else." "I don't," Mira replied, her gaze unwavering. "But I also know that if we stand alone, we'll be crushed. The Velari cannot afford to be forgotten. And if anyone understands how to make the impossible happen, it's the humans." Grant's expression softened, and he gestured for her to sit beside him. "All right, Princess, I'm listening." Mira took a seat, her eyes never leaving his. "We need to show the Council that the Velari are still a force to be reckoned with, that we still have something to contribute. But I can't do it by myself. I need the human influence. Your people have risen to prominence so quickly in the galaxy, and I know the Council respects your strength and your intelligence." Grant leaned back, considering her words. "You're asking us to put our weight behind your cause, to help the Velari regain their standing in the galaxy." "Yes," Mira said, her voice steady. "I'm asking you to show them that the Velari are more than just a small race. We have a vision for the future, a future where our intellect, our adaptability, and our creativity are seen as assets, not liabilities." Grant studied her for a long moment, his blue eyes intense. "I think I understand. You're not just asking for their acceptance, are you? You're asking for their respect, for the Velari to be seen as equals, not just survivors." Mira nodded. "Exactly. The Velari are not weak. We're just different, and that difference is something the galaxy needs." For a moment, there was silence between them as Grant processed her words. Then he nodded slowly. "All right, Princess, I'm with you. But you're going to have to show the Council what the Velari can do. And I'm not talking about just speeches or plans. You need to prove it." Mira felt a rush of relief. She had hoped for this, but hearing it aloud made it real. "I will. I'll show them. I'll show the galaxy what the Velari can do." Grant smiled, his expression warm with approval. "Let's make sure the Council remembers you, Mira. Let's make them see what you've got." And just like that, Mira's plan began to take shape. With the human support and her own resolve, she knew the Velari would no longer be ignored. The galaxy was about to see something it had never witnessed before, the rise of a people who had been underestimated for far too long. And it was going to start with her. The unseen force. The council chamber buzzed with the familiar hum of activity as delegates from across the galaxy gathered for another session of negotiations and power plays. Princess Mira stood at the back of the room, her heart racing with anticipation. Today, she was not just a spectator. Today, she was about to make her presence known in a way that would leave no one indifferent. Her plan was taking shape, a carefully crafted demonstration, a statement not of words, but of action. Mira had spent hours refining her strategy, rehearsing every step, every move. The Velari were known for their intelligence and adaptability, but now they would show the galaxy that those traits could be just as powerful as sheer strength. They could shape the future, not with brute force, but with ingenuity and vision. As the session began, Mira noticed the usual pattern. The larger species, the Zothar and the Kalrath, took center stage, their booming voices filling the hall with demands and ultimatums. Mira had no illusions about the priorities of the Council. It wasn't about what was best for the galaxy as a whole. It was about who could control the most resources, who could dominate the most systems. But today, that narrative was about to change. At the far side of the room, Captain Elias Grant sat among the human delegation, his posture relaxed but alert. Mira had asked him to keep a low profile, and he had agreed, knowing full well that this was her moment to step into the spotlight. Yet Mira couldn't help but feel the weight of his support behind her, a silent strength that bolstered her resolve. Today, she would not stand alone. The chair of the Galactic Concord, a towering figure from the Relaxi species, called the session to order, his voice booming through the chamber. "We will now hear from the Velari delegation," he announced, his tone barely concealing the disinterest that had become standard whenever the Velari were mentioned. It was as if they were a relic, a race on the verge of extinction. To them, the Velari were an afterthought, a curiosity that had outlived its usefulness. Mira stood up, the sound of her soft steps barely audible over the cacophony of the room. She felt the eyes of the council members on her as she walked forward, her every movement deliberate, controlled. As she approached the podium, her violet eyes scanned the faces of the delegates, eyes filled with boredom, disdain, or indifference. The usual response. But today, it would be different. With a deep breath, Mira took her place at the podium, adjusting the crystal crown that rested gently on her head. The hall fell silent, an uneasy hush spreading through the room as they waited for her to speak. Mira did not waste time with pleasantries. She was here to make a statement. "The Velari are not weak," she began, her voice calm but unwavering. "We are not irrelevant, and we are not here to beg for recognition. We are here to show you that our intellect, our creativity, and our agility are not only valuable, they are essential." The room was still. Mira could feel the weight of the council's gaze upon her, and for the first time, she didn't flinch. She stood tall, metaphorically, at least, and let her words hang in the air. She knew the galaxy would never take her people seriously if she tried to fit their mold. So, instead, she would show them something new, something unexpected. "I am not here to tell you what the Velari have done in the past," Mira continued, her voice gaining strength. "I am here to show you what we can do in the future. The Velari may be small, but that does not mean we are insignificant. It means we are underestimated, and that is our greatest strength." She paused, allowing her words to sink in. The murmurs began, a few chuckles, a few dismissive glances, but Mira ignored them. She had come prepared for this. She raised her hand, and the lights in the room dimmed, casting long shadows across the faces of the delegates. A holographic display flickered to life before her, illuminating the council hall with a projection of intricate blueprints, plans for an interstellar communication network that could